More than 2 months after the quake, tsunami, and nuclear plant disaster, a Japanese official speaking to reporters was still expressing confidence about the pace of recovery. The economy, he says, is demonstrating its resilience.
The impact on production will be smaller than was at first thought. Interrupted supply chains have recovered at a remarkable rate, far more swiftly than had been expected.
Government surveys show that over 90% of manufacturing affected by the disaster is set to be back online by summer. Yosano said that Japan's worst post-war crisis could lead to opportunity, but that's a theme analysts are skeptical of.
We still have two large parties that are first very, very competitive, really rather at each other's throats in the policy debates. And in addition, both parties themselves are split on many of the policy issues. So if one party is not united and the other party is not united, how do you get a deal between the two of them? So I think the locals looked at that notion of a trigger for revival and thought it's a nice fantasy, but they don't expect it to be coming anytime soon.
Damage to supply chains, which triggered shortages in the auto and electronic sectors, is only one of the many stiff hurdles the world's third largest economy is having to overcome. Repairing roads, bridges, and other facilities is estimated to cost as much as $300 billion. The March 11th disaster, known here as 3/11, has also taken a heavy toll on business investment and household spending. Factory production fell 15%, and household spending was down almost 9% in March, the sharpest declines on record.
This is what we really had to learn after this disaster. It was not just the loss of the disaster. It was not even just the nuclear disaster, which came on top of the tsunami. It was really the reaction of the country, getting into shock, being shocked about the future prospects, how things can be rebuilt. And this is a very, very big difference to the earthquakes we had beforehand. Beforehand there was a shock and then immediately reconstruction. And this time is different.
Tokyo Electric Power's prolonged struggle to stabilize Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant continues to taint agricultural products. And the loss of reactors has cut the supply of available electricity for eastern Japan, including Tokyo. Although individuals and companies have begun to conserve in preparation for a predicted 10% shortfall in power this summer, there is no certainty about whether supply will cover demand.
What's holding down spending now is the nuclear accident and fears about radiation. Some people are nervous about going outdoors. Also, in order to fund disaster reconstruction, the government is likely to raise taxes, which is also depressing consumption.
Minister Yosano, a fiscal hawk, says a hike in the sales or consumption tax, now at 5%, is inevitable if Japan's fast-aging society is to stay on track to achieve a fiscal surplus by 2020.
The level of a consumption tax has to be raised. Everyone knows. But how to do it is very, very difficult. How to do it without losing political support is more difficult. But we have to do it.
Japan's political squabbling, disarray, and lack of leadership could leave it rudderless in the medium to long term. Analysts say Japan needs a second disaster package of about $100 billion. That's about twice as large as the first emergency budget. So far, there are no clues as to how such a budget would be financed.
If we move well along the way to that more aggressive stance, I think the economy can bounce back relatively well. If we do not move toward that more aggressive stance, I think we'll be looking at several years of negative growth, worsening deflation, and probably worsening fiscal deficits as well. So that's the area where I have my major concern.
All told, the cost of the most expensive disaster in history and its repercussions is calculated at 4% of GDP. Analysts fear that Japan's fractious political parties, under the widely disliked Prime Minister Khan, won't put aside their differences long enough to put the economy back on solid footing.